I am super excited about today's show because as long as I've been watching and covering, being a fan of football, reporting on it, podcasting it, doing play by play, all of those things, I also love fantasy football. I've been playing it since the days that you had to track everything manually before there were websites and apps. But I don't get to talk about it on this show until today. Johnny Tooma is going to be joining me. He's the senior media manager at Roto Underworld and the host of Dynasty Deep Dive. We're going to dig into this Seahawks offense and try to make sense of what kind of fantasy value these players have. There's so many unknowns with all the changes. How does Johnny go about quantifying that? How does he take that into consideration when he makes his rankings, and what's he expecting out of some of the offensive players on this group? We'll talk about the defense too. We understand there's fantasy value when it comes to defense, and then I'll ask him for some of his advice, maybe what his current preferred strategy is for drafting, and I might try to get a little advice about what I'm facing with the 8th pick in my main league on Monday. That's coming up next on Seahawks Forever. Johnny Tooma talking fantasy football.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Before we get started, if you would please subscribe to the YouTube channel, also available in all the audio formats and wherever you listen to the show. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you always get new episodes. And if you like what I do, leave a rating or a review. Really helps things out. The other platforms as well, Substack for the written word, still free, will be until week 2. Also check out Patreon for some exclusive material there as well. Let's get right into this. Let's talk some fantasy football today, shall we? Johnny Tooma, here we go. Hey, Johnny, it's good to have you. I'm a big fantasy football fan. I've played it my entire life. In fact, I'm definitely going to date myself here, but I remember the days of, being a commissioner and having to wait until the USA Today came out on Monday, having to do it all manually.
Nice.
And so I wanted to get you on the show. I really appreciate your material, your content. Been following you on Twitter for quite some time, and kind of dig into what Seahawk fans or just fantasy fans in general that might stumble onto this show can expect from the Seahawks offense. Let's start here from a kind of a wide angle view. There have been so many changes. I mean, the word that I've used this offseason with what the Seahawks have done on offense is they've remodeled that side of the football. New coaching staff, new scheme, and that brings with it obviously a lot of uncertainty. So just in a general sense, as you're trying to evaluate teams around the league and fantasy players, how do you even try to quantify what to expect in Seattle?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks for having me on the show, man. Really appreciate your work as well.
Thank you.
I think with Clint Kubiak being there, it's going to be like a more run-first offense and 2 wide receiver sets, probably some 2 tight end sets as well. And those, a lot of running the football and then play action and stretching the field. And I think that's where the Cooper Kupp and JSN kind of was like a head scratcher to me of like 2 slot guys in an offense like that. So if anybody tells you they know what this offense is going to look like they're dead wrong. They're certainly going to be throwing the football and targeting those guys frequently. But at a high level, I think there is some opportunity in that running game in fantasy football. And I think like that Marquez Valdez-Scantling role that just got freed up for Tory Horton, like that field stretcher role could be pretty interesting as well.
Can't wait to get into Tory Horton. You shared with me a little tidbit before we started recording about your past with him. So can't wait to get into that. So in your best efforts to try to put your finger on what to expect from this offense, what do you use for reference? Do you go back and look at like the Clint Kubiak New Orleans Saints offense from a year ago? Do you try to compare it to what you see out of Shanahan and McVay because they have similar DNA there in their background? Is that kind of what you have to do?
Yeah, that's a great starting point, right? It's like, who's the offensive, string puller? What have they done historically? And then I don't think Mike McDonald and kind of the old guard just completely seeds everything that they believed in, right? So you kind of fuse the 2 together and then also look around at other offenses that have been really highly successful, because you have to imagine any pro who's getting paid money and someone's doing it better than them, they should be learning, right? So learning from the Ben Johnson Detroit offenses, and offenses that are explosive like that, and trying to emulate some of those things. But I think you're still going to see some of that Saints offense in there, and some of that, a whole lot of talk last year from the head coach Mike McDonald about running the football, but not a lot about, like, a lot of times the game got away and it ended up being Geno Smith with a bunch of attempts and not sticking to the ground game as much. So, like, I think you have to just trust what you're hearing sometimes and say, hey, these guys have been adamant that they want to run the football. Like, they are probably going to get around to that a little more this time, now that they've had a whole offseason to look back at how that didn't go right for them last year and what can they do to improve this year.
Yeah, that's definitely been the narrative. They haven't shied away from it. And I got a chance to get out to almost every training camp workout this year as well. And you see they're practicing what they preach, and they're working on it to a level I haven't seen in quite some time here in Seattle as far as running football. And look, at the beginning, a year ago at this time, the New Orleans Saints were probably saying a lot of the same things, and yet they got off to that massive start. Those first couple of games, I think they had 96 points or something like that over those first 2 weeks. A lot of explosive plays, the things that Rashid Shaheed was doing before he got hurt last year. So even though they're going to talk about running the football, but the ultimate goal here is to create some explosives too. There should be some opportunities for fantasy performance here, right?
No, yeah. I think what will be really interesting is to see if they actually deploy JSN way more frequently on some of that, like, flanker responsibilities, because like Matt Harmon, reception perception is a really sharp guy. He looks at all the routes that wide receivers run, where they line up, and he's been beating the drum. Like, JSN, first off, amazing player, just period, but great slot player for sure, but a little slept on in how good of a outside receiver he can be. So again, I think you really do see Kupp in more of a, like, X short area, like slants and slot work, and then with the more field stretcher work being shared with JSN and Tory Horton, and even guys like, is it Derek Young? Right, he showed a little bit of juice.
I've been saying Derek for years. I think that's right.
Okay, Derek Young, like, because I think I heard one announcer say Derek, and I'm like, wait, I know it's not spelled like that, but it's kind of gross to bring a name like that to the table for fantasy purposes. Like, you're not going to be using that guy, but I think, to your point, like, they're going to bore you to sleep with the run and then take the top off with the pass. It's just who's going to be the main beneficiary of those deep plays. And for me, just going off of them releasing MVS, like, I thought he was going to kind of eat into what I wanted to be Tory Horton's role. I think it could be Tory Horton. I think he could be a guy to keep a real close eye on from week one of the season, if you're not already drafting him at the very end of your drafts with your last pick.
So let's just kind of stay with the receivers and get into that a little deeper before we move on. It is, in most years, I would imagine, doing what you do, you give a lot of weight in your projections to what a player did statistically the year before, and then any leap or step forward you would expect the next year. JSN goes out last year, even with the presence of DK Metcalf, and catches 100 balls in his second year in the league.
Yeah.
But it's probably not as simple as expecting him to do that again, because of what we've already talked about with how they plan to operate this offense. So how much do you try to dial that back, or how do you try to quantify in pure numbers what you expect from JSN this year?
Yeah, he's a guy I kind of struggle with, in all honesty, because, like, ever since that game he had in college where he had like 360 receiving yards, something that looked like
Rose Bowl, right?
Yeah. It wasn't like week 0 against East Albania State or whatever. It was I think Nebraska, or a solid team at the time, right, in the Rose Bowl, and I've been so high on him ever since he came out as a prospect. Kind of underwhelmed, right, with Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf in year 1. And year 2, they used him much more the way you wanted to see, right? But what I struggled with was still under 2 yards per route run. So 1.83 yards per route run is 42nd in the NFL. That's per player profiler. And that's not, like, right home about efficiency. And so there's some concerns there because the volume metrics are there, but some of the underlying on analytics on JSN is actually like, I don't think it's directly a result of him. It's just that I don't think they were clicking correctly and featuring him enough. And so like I actually sold him in one of my dynasty leagues where you keep the players every year because I'm like, there's a little uncertainty there. He just had, by all means, like a pretty solid year. I got Omari on Hampton in a straight up trade for him in dynasty, which is like, so you're getting a first round running back for, so like those are the types of trades where I was like, I can't say no to that. Especially in like a dynasty league. Like I'd probably almost take Omari on over him in redraft now too, just with the Najee situation. This was before the Najee situation. So I say that all, it's a little long-winded, but just I really like the guy, and I actually ended up selling him in one league, and that's just because your question is, it's kind of hard when you are looking and doing these different ways of how you want to put these projections together, and you're not fully sold on him getting 120 catches or 1,500 yards. Like that's another area of concern. It's just like he was the average depth of target was relatively low. The receiving yardage per reception was relatively low. And so it would be cool if they do use him a bit more downfield and he can find success like Matt Harmon thinks he can.
Feels like kind of the ultimate example of a player who could take a step forward, become a better player, and improve his game this year, but yet have a worse statistical season just because of the context of the offense. It would be unfair to ask you what you think of this version of Cooper Kupp now at the age of 32, because they pretty much kept him in bubble wrap and only gave him a few reps in the second game against Kansas City, and he didn't have any catches or anything else. But based on what you saw the end of last year in Los Angeles, when he did come back healthy, how much do you think he has left in the tank, and kind of where do you have him sort of projected this year as well?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked about him because he's a guy in the past few years, like I've been avoiding pretty heavily just because I kind of saw the durability concerns and the cost was a little too rich. Now you can get him in fantasy in like the middle rounds of your draft, right? And this guy's got paid a significant amount of money to come there and be your starting wide receiver. Like if he's healthy, he's going to be out there and he's going to be featured. And there was some things to like last year. He had a 29.6% target rate, which was fifth in the NFL. And that was like, again, battling injuries, not being 100%, having some games where he was completely disappeared. And that's still that when he was still garnering targets, right? And 17.0 expected fantasy points per game, ranked 15th in the NFL. So there was gas in the tank when the car could turn on and go, right? And so like I pick 100 in a PPR league. I actually prefer him as a click over Jaxon Smith-Njigba for some of those reasons we talked about. So like for me, fantasy is all about price. If I could get what Cooper Kupp, a fraction of what he is when he's at 100%, he could be a steal in those later rounds.
What's kind of the earliest that you're seeing JSN go? Where do you kind of have him ranked?
So he goes like pick 33 through like 30 through 38 generally. I probably have him just after 38 in around like 39 because the guys that are typically going after him that I push ahead are the Jalen Hurts, the Jaden Daniels. That how you perceive those quarterbacks, and like some people are passing on Lamar and Josh Allen ahead of him to get him at like pick 30, right? Like those guys are still available at 30. And Hurts and Jaden Daniels are available at like the back end of 30. So I have all the quarterbacks kind of squeezed up. Like I have my bona fide 1A wide receivers and running backs. And like I have him kind of in that next tier right after that. And in between them, I have like your bona fide quarterbacks who are fantasy difference makers. So again, my exposure to him is it's one of those things where if he has a bananas year, I'm going to be kicking myself a little bit because I love the guy and I might be overthinking all of this. But I've also seen guys I really like, just like Jerry Jeudy, for instance. I'm a Broncos fan, and watching him as a Bronco was sad. But then watching him in an area with someone who knew how to use him and use him correctly, you're like, I knew the guy was good. I just need to give up on him in fantasy for a little bit because the situation he was in wasn't right for him. you know.
Now, you mentioned Colorado. This is what we talked about before I hit record, that you're a lifelong native there. So you got a lot of up close and personal looks at Tory Horton at Colorado State. Said you got the opportunity to interview him at the Combine as well. His ascension has been fun to watch. He goes in the 5th round this year, when most people, if it hadn't been for the pretty significant injury he suffered last year that ended his season prematurely, would have been a day 2 pick most likely. And then all he has done since he's gotten healthy is continue to make plays every day in camp, in the preseason games, even as a punt returner, to the point that the Seahawks end up releasing Marquez Valdez-Scantling this week, who was brought in to kind of play that role, right? Be that X guy, a deep threat, probably the fastest guy among that group. But Horton's a guy that has that in his game too. He's taller, he's longer, he's clocked a 4.3 before pre-injury. Your thoughts on him and the potential impact he can have as that third guy as a rookie?
This guy is like an absolute stud. Like, it was crazy watching him on the field against whoever they played. He was always the best player on the field on both sides of the ball. Like, probably besides when CU was up against it with Travis Hunter, right? But this guy is legitimately very talented, and he was the heart and soul of CSU's team. What I really liked him was when he was a junior and 4th-year senior, which was 2023 and 2024. He had over 1,100 yards in both years. And in the junior year, he had 71 catches. The senior year, 96 catches. Yeah. So both were cool because he got over 1,100 yards each time, but one was with just a little – he showed he could stretch the field with only 70 catches to hit that 1,100 yards, and then he also showed he could be more of a possession guy. And that's what he's shown, is the ability to, like, run after the catch, win on slants, win on, like, all parts of the route tree. And so, like, he is a guy who could actually be your featured wide receiver. And I think – that's not how people are looking at him right now, right? You've got your guys ahead of him, but like, I'm really convinced that this guy was an absolute star, and he just had kind of a weird twist of fate where if he would have came out as a junior or even a 4th-year senior, he probably would have been a 2nd-round draft pick. Decides to stay at school. I asked him at the Combine, why did you stay at school? Like, you should have declared. I didn't say that, but like, that was what I was thinking. And he was like, I just wanted to get my degree. Like, I was close, and like, I made that commitment. And so, admirable answer, but then he stays, tears his knee up. He's a little older. He's coming off a major injury. Still, to get drafted in the 5th round is not like, that's a lot of guys don't get drafted at all. So he still had draft capital, and he could have had much higher draft capital. And this wouldn't be such of a like, oh, there's this guy who's a 5th rounder who could be good. Like, you'd be sold that this guy was a top level star if he wouldn't have the injury or would have declared earlier.
All right, I want to get into this running back room. I'm fascinated to hear your thoughts on this. There's a lot of mystery and intrigue around this room. One that I've been saying for months is one of the youngest, deepest rooms in the league. Everybody on the 53-man and the practice squad now, all 6 guys on their rookie contracts. We've seen the upside from Kenneth Walker. We've seen how dynamic and explosive he can be. We've seen the production that Zach Charbonnet can provide when given the opportunity, and he's gotten opportunities because Walker gets hurt a lot. And even throughout camp, they've had to kind of nurse him through. He doesn't practice back-to-back days. I don't know how much of that is them really trying to preserve him. They said there was a little bit of a foot injury, but when he was on the field, he looked like the best player on the field in practice.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in the preseason games, we've seen Zach Charbonnet look like the best player on the field, and he was doing that in camp as well. Brady Henderson of ESPN says he thinks it's going to be much closer to a timeshare than some people expect, even if Walker's 100% healthy. How are you projecting this backfield to shake out?
Yeah. Well, first off, I just want to say thank you for giving me a safe space to go so hard about Tory Horton for like 2 minutes there. So,
absolutely.
But to your point, like, I love Kenneth Walker. He is so fun to watch. He's fast. He's explosive. He can cut on a dime, right? That's not the concern. The concern is like, it's foot stuff, it's ankle stuff, it's thigh stuff, it's groin stuff, it's abdomen stuff. Like, and these are all like all the areas I made or just said, I'm not making up. Like, those are all areas that are going to be persistent issues for him that we've seen on his injury report before. And you will see again throughout the season, they're going to nurse this guy after he gets 10 or 15 carries in a game, right? And like that is such a big red flag to me in terms of like fantasy. And like, again, I love the player. If I knew I was getting him at 100% and for the full year, he'd be a top 10 pick probably. Seriously, like that, people are still willing to draft him in the 40s, knowing all the things that I'm talking about. So where that makes me look is Zach Charbonnet, who was just a stud whenever Kenneth Walker went down, especially like for fantasy purposes, right? The efficiency wasn't always, it would be like 30 carries for like 110 yards, but he'd have like a receiving touchdown too and 5 catches for like 25 yards, which is, again, the efficiency isn't nothing to write home about, but the volume and the fantasy points are there in bunches. Whenever Walker misses games, I would expect him to miss a few games. And I would expect, yes, to your point, it's probably more of a timeshare because to your point, they've been saying the guy is a dog. I can't remember the exact phrase someone said, but like Kenneth Walker's been showing up, or Zach Charbonnet's been showing up to work every day and slowly prying that role out of Kenneth Walker's hands while he's not even out there sometimes,
Man, have I got the deal for you. It's Labor Day weekend, and Labor Day weekend's about a lot of things, right? It's about family. It's about sunshine. It's about kids. It's about baseball, football, college football anyway, although we don't get any NFL football until next week. But it's also about barbecuing, and what better to barbecue for your family while you're camping than steaks. And I want to tell you about my friends at Omaha Steaks. I have used this company for many years. Just last year, my brother sent me a pack of Omaha Steaks for my birthday as a surprise. Showed up on my doorstep one day. Outstanding quality, from handcrafted steaks to family grilling favorites. Omaha Steaks delivers the world's best steak experience right to your door. Enjoy USDA certified tender steaks, juicy burgers, deli style franks, meaty chicken wings, and much more. And right now, during their Labor Day sale, you can get 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. That is not a misprint. 50% off at omahasteaks.com. Plus, our listeners, if you listen to Seahawks Forever, you get an extra $35 off with promo code FOREVER at checkout. I love steaks. I have, until retiring recently, worked in a steakhouse environment for 6 years. One of the most prominent, prestigious, well-known, and well-respected steakhouses in the Pacific Northwest. And I think Omaha Steaks does a really, really solid job of meeting those types of standards. Again, we're talking about certified USDA quality steaks here, and they're brought right to your door in a refrigerated pack. They're each cryo-packed individually. Throw them right in the freezer, and then just pull them out whenever you need to. Throw them on the grill. I like to make mine with some sautéed onions and mushrooms, maybe a little demi-glaze or some green peppercorn sauce. Man, I'm telling you, get fired up for fall grilling with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide during their Labor Day sale. And remember, for an extra $35 off that order, in addition to the 50% off discount, use promo code FOREVER at checkout. Yeah, that was, I think it was Clint Kubiak a few weeks ago that was asked about what he values in a running back, and he talked about availability was the first thing. Availability and intelligence, and it was like it seemed like he was trying to send a little bit of a message. Yeah, for sure. It's difficult, right? Because every mock draft I've done and a couple of the live drafts I've done this year, like I've really tried to acquire that handcuff. And I just feel like that would be an ideal scenario if you could get Walker and then you could get Charbonnet, because one of them is going to establish himself at some point. And if Walker ever does get hurt, then Charbonnet's a bell cow. But it's hard to do because I feel like the secret's out and Charbonnet's going too high. And anytime you got to grab Walker, like in the third, as you mentioned, but then I'm seeing, Charbonnet's going in the fourth or fifth, and I'm not going to take my handcuff 2 picks in a row. But something I would imagine that you would suggest if the opportunity presents itself.
I really am actually happy you brought that up, because I've started moving away from the idea of, especially in like bigger leagues or where you're playing in like a tournament with multiple teams, or, that have a group finals or something, you have to shoot for like absolute upside. So like you're grabbing handcuffs of different teams. You're grabbing Bijan and assuming Bijan's healthy, And then you're not grabbing like Jonathan Taylor in this example, but then you go get DJ Giddens because, again, Jonathan Taylor's a guy that we can almost bet our bottom dollar is going to miss a few games. Mm-hmm. And so that's actually how I'm looking at it, is I'm kind of just like avoiding Kenneth Walker, knowing that if I get Zach Charbonnet at 100, like that scenario, there's a time and a space where you're super happy with that pick because Charbonnet's, the RB1 while Kenneth Walker is out for 4 weeks on IR or something like that. So I've kind of been prioritizing Charbonnet over Kenneth Walker. And when Charbonnet came out of the in the draft, I thought he was a great player, but I also thought he was always going to be behind Kenneth Walker. So again, this isn't a thing that I really think that he's more talented than Kenneth Walker. It's just at cost and how I'm weighing it from a fantasy perspective, I'm kind of out. And the last thing I'll say, George Holani played kind of admirably, but what actually scared me a little bit was Dameon Pierce, because I thought he was going to go a lot earlier than the 7th round. I think he had some issues with the DUI and probably some they dropped the charges on it, but they could have done some more NFL investigation and found some dirt on this guy, because the talent, he was better than a 4th round talent, and you guys just released him. So there's something there with Damian Martinez that's off. But I thought he didn't look like the same player to me this preseason. I mean, I was such a huge Martinez fan. We got to watch him in the Pac-12 here at Oregon State for a couple of years before he went to Miami for the 1 year. He was such a violent runner. I just didn't see that this preseason. He looked like a different dude. Yeah, something was off there. And I thought he could make this room a little less enticing, because it could be a 3-headed monster where he plays a mid-round pick and starts getting a little bit involved in the offense. They released him. I think Holani is going to play special teams. You know what I mean? And so this room is attractive to me for that sense of especially if one guy goes down in it and you got the bell cow in pick 100 or whatever. So Zach Charbonnet giving it out free on Seahawks Forever. Do we? Yeah, we appreciate that. How do we make heads or tails of this tight end room? You mentioned it. Kubiak likes to go a lot of 12, 22 personnel. He'll even go 3 tight ends at times. We've seen the upside from Elijah Arroyo. My goodness. John Schneider said after they drafted him, even some of their scouts in the room thought he could play X receiver. We saw a really, really pleasant surprise from A.J. Barner as a rookie. I didn't think he'd contribute like that as a pass catcher as he did. In this kind of offense, do you really give much value at all to anyone from that group? Well, first off, I want to push this back on you. You've been there, you've seen some of the camps, who is running with the ones more frequently? It's all over the place. And Eric Saubert's part of that too. And he's not a guy that anyone's going to draft in fantasy, but he's such a good run blocker. They mix and match those guys so often. I do think, Barner will be a steadying influence. He's not a guy that I'm looking to draft in fantasy. Arroyo's the intriguing one, because at some point when they dial in, how to use him, and if he stays healthy, he had a lot of injury concerns in college, but it certainly, to this point anyway, hasn't followed him into the NFL. He looks like a guy that, even when we talk about the wide receiver group and just weapons as a whole, that at some point he could become one of the most dynamic fantasy forces on this team. It's just a matter of what's his snap share going to be and what's his target share going to be. We just don't know right now. Yeah, and the reason I asked that too is they seem to like Barner. Right, it's not like they drafted Arroyo and traded Fant away, and it was just the Arroyo show. Everything I'm hearing is that he's kind of their starter, at least at the beginning of the season. And Arroyo is a talented player. The one issue I have with him, similarly, you pick the wrong guy sometimes, and I just start sounding like a wet paper bag, but him staying healthy is another thing. He had a knee injury in college, and then he had knee injury complications a year later, and then he missed some of the Senior Bowl with a knee bruise, which I know could be completely unrelated, but I start picking up these breadcrumbs of this guy's, his knee is going to be his only question because that's what they said. He would have been a first round. He's an explosive player. I think they clocked him at like 21, 22 miles on GPS in college. The highlights are fun. He is the explosive upside play. I think my concern is that if he can stay healthy and carve out a role. And so to also give a definitive answer, I'm kind of just staying away from these tight end rooms because, like, especially in shallower leagues, you can get, Evan Ingram if you fade the position, right? Or like Dallas Goedert as your tight end too. And like, there's 12 tight ends ahead of these guys that I'm picking up for them,
Yeah, I've been getting Hawkinson like in the 5th and 6th all day long. Even Laporta seems to be going a lot lower than I would expect him to. There's a lot to choose from there in the tight end room. Let's finish up with the quarterbacks. This is an interesting one. Sam Darnold kind of resurrected his career last year with the big year in Minnesota, had a bunch of MVP buzz until things kind of went awry at the end of the year. I'd be interested to know, when you're evaluating him, how much weight you gave those last 2 games, how much you put on his lap, and how much was kind of sort of functional or sort of organizational dysfunction as far as that offense went. It was kind of a complete failure in my opinion. But just how you see him fitting in this offense and kind of where he fits into, like, just where would you draft him?
Yeah, he's a funny one because, like, Justin Herbert choked in the playoffs too, right? And nobody questions if he's a good quarterback. So I think it's more like there was that quote about him saying like he's seeing ghosts or something like that. And I thought that was years ago, but people hang on to these things.
People don't let go of that.
Yeah, and NFL owners and GMs probably rightly don't either, And so he's showed a lot on film last year. But what's most interesting to me is for a guy who put together like a top QB1 finish, like top 12 finish, he is getting drafted at like QB 27 in fantasy. So, and this is market data. This just means the market at large is convinced it was a system thing and not a Sam Darnold thing. And I think I'm kind of with the market on that too, that like I was never blown away with him as a quarterback, and he could maybe find success, but it might be like Matt Castle when he left the Patriots to come to the Chiefs. Like, I think they won like 10 games, and people were like, "Oh, like Castle's he's not that bad." But like Sam Darnold was a guy who was getting benched his whole career before this, and so if you guys can be like a QB whisperer to him, I think there's like those Dave Canaleses and those guys around the league that like they seem to be the successful ingredient in making the quarterback successful. Kevin O'Connell being a proven one. And I think that's why people are so in on JJ McCarthy and putting him ahead of him in fantasy. Is they're like, we like who's whispering in his ear right before the play's about to, get snapped. And so that's my biggest concern with Sam Darnold is just that like there's not enough there after 1 year of being in a really great system with a great offensive mind to just like to take the risk. I'd probably, again, prioritize other quarterbacks. Like, I liked Geno. I don't know if that's like a wrong thing to say out loud now.
No.
There was a little animosity there at that preseason game.
No, this show was a fan of Geno, and I like the move to get Darnold, given the options that were out there. I thought it was the best place they could have pivoted to. I think most Seahawk fans are pulling for Geno to have some success with the Raiders. So, I mean, let's talk about it. Like, where would you draft Geno, and how do you think he's going to fit in that Chip Kelly offense?
I mean, I think he's it could be an more explosive offense than people think. And like, they're going to have to score points to keep up with some of their schedule. And it's the thing is, I brought them up because they're kind of close. Like, they're guys who might in a deeper, like in redraft, you probably are just leaving these guys on waivers. But if it's a bigger league, you might have a QB2 you'd want to hang on to. And like, he might be someone I'd consider if I'd probably go like Jaden Daniels in that as example, and like actually draft a quarterback high, like I was talking about earlier, and then get a guy like Geno or even Darnold. I feel a little less easy about, but a guy in those later rounds where you're like, I know I can lean on them and that they're going to kind of outperform and be closer to a fringe QB1, but I'm getting them in the mid 20s of like QBs going off the board. So I kind of like Geno as a sneaky pick in those later rounds is my point.
How high do you have the Seahawks defense ranked?
You know what? That's a good question. I haven't done defenses yet because I have to look at like the actual weekly schedules, and I typically actually end up just streaming them. So I think in fantasy,
we can talk about that. That was going to be my next question. How high is too high to draft a defense? Because there's always that one guy in every league, right?
Yeah.
That tries to get one that goes like 8th round, 9th round, trying to get the best defense. Does it make that much of a difference, or do you prefer the streaming route?
No, I would say it's the most like foundational advice I can give you anyone comfortably is wait till like the very last round to pick a defense. Get like, for instance, I think like the Cardinals play like the Saints week 1 or something. So they're toting out Spencer Rattler. Nobody's drafting the Cardinals because like on paper, they're not a top defense. That's worry about winning week 1 with your defense. And then next week, if the Saints were terrible, go get the next team who's playing them. Go get, and so I typically I'm a Broncos fan and love the Broncos D, for instance. Like we were the best defense in fantasy football last year, but you just think about the division we're in. We got to play the Chiefs and Chargers twice. And then it's like for the Seahawks too, like you're going to have to play the 49ers. The Cardinals like to try and run up the scoreboard. So I typically really don't put too much weight on a defense and just pick them up in the last round. And same with kickers. Wait till the very last round on kickers. Prioritize all the skill players with the most upside in those later rounds and get the foundational pieces that are going to be starters and have big roles in the earlier rounds.
All right, I want to finish with this. What is your current preferred strategy? We talked a little bit about this before we went on, how I've changed my philosophy in recent years. I used to be stuck on having to get my running backs early, and then I discovered that over about a 7 or 8 year period, I wasn't winning championships anymore. And I flipped that the last couple of years and went wide receiver heavy, and I've won 2 titles. But that might be shifting back, right? As NFL teams now are looking to be more physical and running the ball more. If you were giving a new fantasy football player advice on how to draft, what's your current preferred strategy?
Yeah, it's so tough because I think there are different strategies based on the hands you're dealt, right? If you get the first pick, you get Jamar Chase, and then you start figuring out what to do from there, right? But if you don't, then the in a nutshell though, you want to get a foundational wide receiver 1 that could have like top 5 upside, or a bell cow running back in those first 2 rounds, and then start thinking about actually looking at players that you're higher on than consensus that you're comfortable about. So like, I'm not sure if this is a great example. It's kind of a guy I feel this way a little bit about is like Nick Chubb right now. Joe Mixon, there's so much uncertainty. He could have a starting role and hang on to it and be somewhat what he was. And there's you just don't know. And you could get him at like round 15 or something like that, and then plug him in and say, okay, I know I've got one running back spot like where I'm a little bit higher and I'm going to get one of those guys. So now I got to lean into receiver a little bit more. So bottom line, look, understand where you are in the draft board, like middle of the board, front of it, and kind of who's going to be falling to you in those later rounds that you're excited about. And that actually helps me with my build the team, because at the end of the day, I'm not focused on positions as much as I am focused on getting the top performing players.
How much weight do you give the quarterback when you're thinking of selecting a receiver?
Oh, so like stacking okay. So
just because Malik Neighbors is going top 5, top 6 in a lot of drafts. I don't like his quarterback situation there, but some guys are quarterback proof. Some guys can produce no matter what, right?
First off, I think Jaxson Dart could get in there pretty fast and light it up with them. So be on the lookout for the Giants to actually not be a laughing stock is kind of my initial. I just like to be a little edgy where I can with you, Dan. But I definitely weigh it. And that's where, again, Jamar Chase becomes like a no-brainer to me. I really like Bijan Robinson, but at the end of the day, that's just the most perfect situation you could ever dream up of for a wide receiver. Like, quarterback loves him. Defense is terrible. He's incredibly productive, Triple Crown winner. Like, block that in at wide receiver. And then once you get to these guys like DK Metcalf, where there is some of that kind of quarterback grossness, like Aaron Rodgers at this point of his career, you start really considering it. But in general, yeah, I do. I consider it to the point where, like I said, I'm thinking about stacking them too. I'm like, if I'm getting T. Higgins or Jamar Chase, like, I want to go get Joe Burrow too, right? If I'm getting Mike Evans, I want to get Baker Mayfield too, because I'm trying to create additional leverage there and doubling down on my bet that Mike Evans is going to have a big year from Baker Mayfield, right?
Yeah. All right. I said that was the last question, but I have one more. Monday is my biggest league that I've been playing in the longest. I won the title 2 years ago. I'm drafting 8th in a 12-teamer. It's half PPR. Eight seems like a weird spot, like the top 7 kind of are consensus. And then I've got some weird choices to make it 8. Which way would you go?
Yeah, like, you're staring Malik Neighbors directly in the face, right?
Yeah. So Neighbors, Nakua, Nico Collins is kind of
Genty, if you want to, like,
yeah. Oh yeah.
He'll be on the board, because it's actually kind of funny how, like, it is kind of chalked out the first 6 picks, in my opinion. Jamar Chase, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, CeeDee Lamb, and Saquon Barkley, of course, right? And so, like, if one of those guys fall to you, you jump all over it, right?
Sure.
And which is a chance in, like, a home league, or, you know, even in big leagues, Christian McCaffrey gets reached for a lot, like, historically, like, even before he's the 101. Like, sometimes I had a guy take him as a 101 when nobody, like, it was that year when no one was, he's, I think, still going in the first. It could happen, right? And what was funny about that story was he actually went on to be the 101 that year, and it was like everybody was laughing at him for going, like, McCaffrey over some other guy who ended actually up getting injured. But then I would. So that's my next question for you. Would you take a chance on Christian McCaffrey if he was there at 108?
No. You know, at the beginning of the process, yeah, because I thought there was value there, right? I mean, if he's healthy, he's obviously going to be the featured back there. It's just, you know, they've got issues in their wide receiver room. I'm concerned about that. I think their defense might be bad this year, and they're going to have to play catch up a lot. I'm probably steering clear of him there. I'm honestly, you know, unless one of those other guys drops that you mentioned, probably leaning Nico Collins right now, just because I think his quarterback situation's good, and the way he finished last year after he got healthy was pretty hard to ignore. So
he's amazing. Like, I think he's one of those guys who's every bit as more legit than people even realize. And again, Matt Harmon, reception perception, huge on Nico Collins, believes he's like a top 5 player. And I like, in half PPR, you're a little less reliant on, like, points per reception. You're just getting a half point. So you'd actually skew towards yards in that scenario. And he's a guy who, if he gets like 90 catches, he get like 1,500 yards, right? And then, so in that format specifically, I might even bump him up a little bit. But I got to be honest, I would still be pretty close with Malik Neighbors, just because I believe in the talent that's there with him so much. But that's one of those things where it's like I'm a you know, if I've spoken into existence before that I believe he's that talented, I gotta, like, stick with my guns, you know. But that's a tough spot. Is my point. I would love to have been like 6 and got 6 guys that fall. You know?
I was hoping Neighbors would fall to me, but the guy that had him last year drafts ahead of me, and I know that he's probably going to go there again. So, you know, some of that's at play, right? All right, I'm written down all my notes here, so I'm ready. I'm ready for my draft. Remind all the folks where they can find all your content.
Yeah, thanks for having me on again, man. So I'm at Fantasy Picasso on X. I just talked some crap about, I was hyping up Isaac Tesla, and it's got almost 1 million views, which is awesome. So thank you guys for that. But find me on X at Fantasy Picasso, and then I work for Player Profiler and help manage their social media. So follow the Player Profiler YouTube page. You'll see me on there. I have my own show. At Dynasty Deep Dive, or it's not at Dynasty Deep Dive. That's the name of the show. It's on YouTube. You can follow it find it on the Player Profiler channel. And again, thanks for having me on, man.
Yeah, Johnny Tooma, thanks for taking the time, man. We'll do this again sometime.
For any, I'd be happy to.
All right, we'll see you then. That was awesome. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Tell me down below in the comments, what's your approach this year? You're all Seahawk fans. And those of you that play fantasy football, Labor Day weekend's a big time for drafts. That's why I thought it was timely. How are you planning to handle Seahawk players? I, in the past, have tended to err on the side of caution and not let my passion for the team get in the way of my perceived objectivity as I try to just draft the best team that I think will have the best chance of winning me a championship. But sometimes I think I go too far with that and I pass up opportunities to take Seahawks because I don't want to be a homer. But there's always one or two guys in the league also that take guys way, way, way too high from the Seahawks. How are you going to approach it? Who do you like from this team when it comes to fantasy football? That's going to do it for this one. At Seahawks Forever on both Twitter and Blue Sky. Also subscribe to all the different platforms, all the other ways that you can consume my content or help support me as a full-time independent content creator, all listed and linked down below as well. Forever and always, go Hawks. Have a good Labor Day weekend, you guys. We'll see you soon.